Hey guys, it's Lauren Harpster. I am back again with lesson 3 out of 6 that I am posting this month for my French Beaded Canterbury Bells class. I'm teaching this class in 3 different locations this month. I have the class going in the Learn How to Make French Beaded Flowers Facebook group. So if you want to come and join us, a little community learning the art of French beaded flowers together, that would be awesome. You can come join us there. I'm also running the class on YouTube and then also on my my main website, beadandblossom.com. So wherever you're watching, I hope you guys will enjoy this class. This lesson, we are learning how to make the leaves. We are working with the basic frame and lacing techniques. Specifically, I'm going to be doing lace as you go. You're going to need size 11 seed beads in a transparent light green and then a transparent green. You will need some 26 gauge copper core wire. I am using a color called Peridot by Parawire. And then I'm also going to use 28 gauge wire, and this time I'm using it to lace the leaves. Now normally I use a 30 gauge wire to lace the leaves because it sinks down between the beads a little bit better and it's easier to get it to weave into those tight little loops that we use during lacing. But I'm using 28 gauge this time just because I don't want you guys to buy another spool of wire just to lace a couple of leaves. But if you already have 30 gauge wire and you prefer to lace with 30 gauge wire, feel free to use that instead of the 28 gauge wire that I'll be using. Now we're going to be learning 3 different leaf sizes in this video. I did teach leaf A in the previous video, so make sure that you check that one out as well. I'm going to start this demo off with leaf B. We're going to be working with the lighter green seed beads, and we're going to string about 5 inches of these beads onto the spool of 26 gauge copper core wire. And we're leaving the wire attached to the spool this time. Got a wrong color bead in there. We're leaving the wire attached to the spool this time because with basic frame, if you just have one color of beads, then you can just work straight off the spool without having to cut any wire off. That will save you just in case you use a little bit more wire than I do. That way you won't run out of wire, and also you have a little bit less wire laced. Now I've got at least 5 inches on there. That's more than 5 inches, but you need at least 5 inches for one leaf. Strung onto the spool, still attached to my spool here. In the very end of my working wire, I'm going to make a little loop so that my beads don't come off while I'm working. And then I'm going to bring down the beads for my basic row. Now for leaf D, the basic row is 1 1/4 inches long. So I'm going to measure out 1 1/4 inches. Make sure that your beads and your wire are straight. Measure out 1 1/4 inches of beads. Just like that. That is our basic row. And I'm going to move those up until they're about 1/2 inch away from the little top of the wire. Right about there. I'm going to pinch and hold those in place, and now we're going to make the bottom wire and the bottom loop. I'm going to measure out somewhere around 3 to 4 inches of wire. We don't need a very long bottom wire for this little tiny leaf, so you don't need to waste your wire making a really long bottom loop. So just a little bit of wire there, and we're going to bring that wire over into a loop. Cross the wire over the front, right below those beads that we measured out for our basic row. It's right below those beads. And I'm going to pinch and hold right there where the wires cross. And I'm also grabbing the bottom of the basic row. So I'm going to grab and hold that with one hand. And then I need to twist the 2 wires in this loop. Now I'm going to make sure that the wires in my loop are opened up at kind of a wide V, so that they're the same angle away from the center, and then pulled down while I'm twisting to try and get a nice smooth twist. Now you don't need to twist down very far. A good 1/2 inch there should be plenty for this size leaf. We're going to leave the rest of it untwisted. For straighten out the frame, I just grabbed the top wire and the bottom loop and kind of pull in opposite directions. You can wiggle back and forth if you need to, but just straighten out your frame there. All right, now my working wire is the wire that is still attached to my spool. That's the one that is loaded with all the beads, and that's what we're going to use to make the last 2 rows of beads in this leaf. Also important to know is that this wire right up here at the top is the top wire, and then we have this twisted wire here below the basic row, and that is called the bottom wire. This down here is the bottom loop. All right, we are making a 3-row basic frame, and we are going to be wrapping pointed top and pointed bottom. The pointed wrap is usually the hardest one to learn in French beading. It just takes a little bit of practice. So if you can't get it on your first try, just use the leaf anyways. It's going to be fine. It's just a leaf. And just keep practicing, keep trying. All right, now row number 1 is the row right in the middle. So we're already done with row 1, and we're going to be making row 2 on the left side of the leaf. We want to make sure that our beads in row 2 are all the way down to the bottom wire. If you have a little bit of a gap there, sometimes the row 2 will come up above the basic row. So make sure that your beads are situated kind of below and that they're pressed as close against that bottom wire as you can. That will help to minimize any wire that shows on the front side of your leaf. I'm going to straighten out the length of beads that I am using for this row. I do that just by kind of running my finger along it like this. Make sure that your top wire is straight. And we're going to bring the beads up right beside that basic row. Take some time. Make sure that your rows are nice and tight and molded together. And also make sure that you're holding tension on the beads while you're doing that, because we don't want gaps to form between our beads while we're making our rows. Right beside that basic row, take a second to mold and shape your row. And I do that just by kind of slowly moving upwards toward the top. And then I'm going to pinch and grab right there at the top. That's going to help hold the new row in place right beside that basic row. Now to make a pointed top, we need to cross over and wrap at a 45-degree angle. So we're going to take this working wire, we're going to go over the front of the top wire. Do not go around the back, you're going to end up with exposed wires. Let's go around the front of that top wire at a 45-degree angle. If you're approaching the top wire at a flattened angle, it's going to be a whole lot harder to get a nice pointed wrap. So approach that top wire already at that 45-degree angle, and we're going to measure beads so that the last bead in the row is either right in front of that top wire or right on top of it. We don't want the bead to go past the top wire at all. So if you have a bead that's like halfway past that top wire, eliminate that bead and go one bead less. I'm going to pinch and hold right there. That's going to help hold that row in place so it doesn't move around. It's going to help hold tension on my working wire, and it's going to give a little bit more support to this top wire. Pinch and hold right there. Now to make a 45-degree angle wrap, you need to make sure that you have tension on your working wire. You're not going to be able to get a very tight wrap if your working wire is loose. So hold your working wire nice and tight. I kind of grab it right here with these fingers, and then I use my thumb as a wedge right here between the working wire and the top wire. And I'm not really putting a lot of pressure on my thumb. It's just giving me a little bit of extra tension right there where I'm going to be wrapping. All right, I'm going to bring the wire around the back side and to the front again. And as I cross over the front, I'm going to go up at that 45-degree angle. Now what you're going to notice here in the wrap, let me get in a little bit closer. The top part of the wrap and the bottom part of the wrap are separated. There's a little gap between them. They should look kind of like this, like a little gap right there, right around that top wire. Well, if your wraps of beads are stacked on top of each other like this, that's how you make a 90-degree angle wrap, and it's going to make a rounded top. So make sure that you have that angle and that separation in your wraps. Bring more beads down from your spool. And then we're going to fold beads down the side. Give a little push right there at the top to kind of pointify the top of your row. Now you just finished row 2, and now we're going to do row 3. Row 3 goes down to the bottom wire. I'm going to straighten out the beads I'm going to use and the wire that make up row 3. Just makes it a little bit easier to measure and to wrap the rows. Bring the beads down the side of the basic row, and I'm going to rotate my piece while I'm doing that just because it makes it easier to wrap. Take a minute and mold your rows nice and tight and close together. And I'm going to pinch and hold again right there at the bottom. I'm pinching and holding the basic row, row 2, and then also now row 3. so that they stay really close together and they don't move around. Cross over the bottom wire at a 45-degree angle to make a pointed bottom. Now this is also the last row of our leaf, so this little wrap here at the bottom is going to look slightly different. Cross over at a 45-degree angle, and then we're going to double wrap the wire. But this time, because we're tying off the wire, we do want the wire to look like a little coil. So those little wires are stacked on top of each other, and that's just going to finish off the wire and also make like a short little collar right below the last row of beads. Now for leaf B, we're going to reduce to 2 bottom wires, and that means that we're going to remove the working wire right there, right where we tied it off. So just cut right there. It'll cut it off your spool and remove that working wire. And then we're going to cut open this bottom loop. I usually do that off on the side. That way, when I straighten this out, I have wires at 2 different lengths. And if you don't have any twists here below, twist those down just a little ways. We do want a little bit of grip down there, just like with leaf A in the previous video. We do want a little bit of grip there while we're assembling the flower, so those little twists help with that. Alright, now with this little top wire, we gotta finish that off. We're just going to cut that short, about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, and then we fold it to the back side of the leaf. So that is the finished leaf B. You need to make 8 of these for 1 stem of Canterbury Bells. Now let's make the larger leaves. This is leaf C and leaf D. I'm going to be demonstrating leaf D on camera. So the larger one is the one that I'm going to show here, and then we're going to talk about leaf C and the differences between the two. It's the same method, just a little bit smaller. Now I'm going to be using a different color of lacing wire just to make sure that you guys can clearly see what it's doing, and also so you can tell the difference between my lacing wire and my working wire while I'm making the petal. You'll want to use the darker green seed beads for leaves C and D. Now for leaf D, I've got about 19-20-ish inches of beads strung onto my spool of 26 gauge wire. And I'm going to leave this wire attached to my spool while I'm making the leaf. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut my lacing wire, because I am going to do lace as you go, and I just like to have that prepped beforehand so that when it's time to put it in, I just have to reach down and grab it, and I don't have to stop wrapping rows to make a lacing wire. So we need about 3 to 4-ish inches of the 28 gauge lacing wire, or 30 if you chose to use 30. I'm going to cut that off the spool and then fold that in half. Alright, so that's my lacing wire ready to go, and I'm just going to set that aside for when we need it. Alright. Now let's get our basic frame set up. Leaf D has a 2-inch basic row. So we're going to measure out 2 inches of beads for the basic row. And we're going to make our top wire somewhere around 1 inch long. So scoot those beads up there until they're about 1 inch away from the top wire. Pinch and hold them. And again, we don't need a very long bottom wire here. So we're going to measure out 3 to 4-ish inches of wire. And then form that into a loop right below the basic row. Make sure that you are coming across right below the basic row. I point to the left because I wrap clockwise. We do want our working wire to go over the front of that bottom wire, so make sure you're going over the front. Pinch and hold right there, and then twist. I'm not going to twist all the way down, just maybe 1 inch right there below the basic row, and then straighten it out. Now this is a 7-row basic frame, and the basic row is row number 1. So now we're going to start row number 2. And we are going to be doing pointed top, pointed bottom again. I'm going to straighten out the beads that I'm going to be using for row 2. Now with longer basic rows like this, it can be a little bit trickier to measure out row 2, but I always do row 2 before adding in my lace as you go wire. Because otherwise the lacing wire kind of spins around the basic row and it gets kind of annoying. So I'm going to carefully measure out row 2, just slowly work my way up towards the top, grab and pinch right there, cross over at a 45-degree angle right there. Now my way of wrapping 45-degree angles, it's slightly different. It's basically the same movements, but I do it all in one motion instead of pausing to bring beads down off the spool. So I go over at a 45-degree angle, wrap around the back, and my left hand is doing just as much work as my right hand. That wrist is rotating, so it's doing half the work of doing that wrap. And then I just come straight down at a 45-degree angle instead of going up. It still creates that separation between the top half and the bottom half of the wrap. It's just already in position. I don't know, it's just one fluid motion, but people seem to have a harder time with my way than with the way that most other people do, which is the one I showed with leaf B. Alright, bring beads down and make sure that they are completely covering that top wire. You don't want any wires to be exposed in the front of your leaf. So I'm ready for row 3, but I'm going to stop and add in my lacing wire first. So I'm going to grab that little 28 gauge wire, and I'm going to insert it into the front side of my leaf. Now, to figure out which one's the front side, the back side is the one where you're going to see the little wraps from row 2 right up there. So the back side is going to have visible wraps, and then the front side should not. So we've got 2 little wires here, and we're going to insert that into the front of the leaf right around the basic row. So I've got 1 little wire end going on the left side of the basic row and 1 on the right side of the basic row. And we're going to pull that all the way through so that the little fold in the middle of our wire catches right about midway of the basic row. Now you can measure the placement for this, 1 inch of beads below and 1 inch beads above if you want to, but I just eyeball and that gets me close enough. So about right there, that little fold of wire should catch between 2 beads on the basic row. And then we're going to flip it over and look on the back. You should have 2 wires sticking out of the back side of your leaf. We're going to cross them so that they switch places, and that's going to make a loop right around the basic row. And then I'm just going to pull those out to either side. This one is going to lace the left side of my leaf, and then this wire is going to lace the right side of my leaf. I'm going to go ahead and lace row 2 since I've already got that row done. Now to lace, we're going to bring the wire behind row 2. And then we're going to wrap, oops, see it spins around. Okay, bring the lacing wire around behind row 2. And I use my thumbnail here to kind of mark where I want that lacing wire to go. I'm also pinching and holding those rows together so that I'm not having to pull on my lacing wire to cinch them closer. I don't want to put too much pressure on my lacing wire. All right. Then I'm going to loop around the front of just row 2 and go back down between row 2 and the basic row. So we'll go out the back side right there. And then we're going to pull. Now I'm going to brace the bottom here of this row just because I've got a 26 gauge wire making the leaf and then a 28 gauge wire, which is thicker than normal lacing wire. So you're going to need to pull a little bit harder to get that lacing wire to loop around. So I'm bracing kind of my leaf and my row there so that there's less pressure put on it. But of course you can always just straighten it out afterwards as well. So your lacing wire should only be visible on the on the back side of your leaf, where it went up right between those 2 rows. Now on the front, mine's going to be a little more visible because I'm using red, but you should not have wire going across on the front side of your leaf. If you do, you have laced incorrectly. Alright, now we're going to do row 3, and we're going to lace this one while we make it. So I'm going to bring down enough beads off of my spool, straighten out the beads and the wire that I'm going to be using for this row, and bring them down the side. Take a minute to carefully mold the row of beads directly beside the basic row. We don't want a situation where we've got a gap between the rows. We want them to come already close together. Now I'm going to lace this kind of midway before I even wrap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch and hold that row right there together with the basic row. Pinch and hold it in place. Bring the lacing wire around the back side of row 3, not the front side, around the back. And then loop around the front of the row, right between row 3 and the basic row, so that we make a full loop around just row 3. And we want this little loop to go right between 2 beads on that row, and we want to try and make our lacing wire somewhat straight across our leaf. So try to line up where your lacing wire is going to go to make it as close to straight as you can across your leaf. Pull that tight. All right, so there is halfway through with row 3. And now we're going to measure the rest of the row down to the bottom wire. Again, I'm going to carefully mold my row, cross over at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to show you the first way to do that 45-degree angle again, because I think most people are going to have an easier time with that way. So cross over at a 45-degree angle. Make sure that you have measured your beads properly for your row. The beads should be right in front of that basic wire, or bottom wire, or right on top of it without going past it. And you should already be at a 45-degree angle before you measure your beads. Pinch and hold to give yourself some control. Wrap around the back. Make sure you stay at a 45-degree angle while you're going across the back. And then as you come across the front, go up at a 45-degree angle. Bring beads down from your spool. Straighten them out. And then fold them down and pinch right there at the top. Or sorry, this is actually the bottom of the row, but it looks like the top because we're upside down. All right. Fold those beads down the side, and now you're ready to start row 4. So while counting rows on the basic frame, we've got 1 in the middle, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So a full circuit around the basic row, or a round, has 2 rows of beads in it. Your even count rows are going to be on the left, and your odd count rows will be on the right. Now we're starting row 4, and I'm going to make sure I bring this row up over the lacing wire so that my lacing wire is going behind the row. Straighten out my beads, and we're going to go up to the top wire. Sometimes if you have enough tension on your wire, you can just kind of bring it up right beside without having to scooch up one by one, but whatever makes it easier for you to get your rows looking nice. Now again, I'm going to lace as you go, so I'm actually going to pinch this row in place right there midway while I'm measuring out my row before I wrap. Bring lacing wire around the back side of row 4, and we're going to bring that end around the edge and down between row 4 and row 2. So we're making a loop just around row 4. Pull again to the back, and I'm going to brace the edges there, pull that, and when I pull my wire, I pull it first to this side and then over to this side. I don't want to tighten it by pulling this direction. I'm going to tighten it by pulling it this way first and then bringing it over to the side. Puts a little bit less strain on your lacing wire. Straighten everything back out. And then we're going to wrap at that top wire again. 45-degree angle wrap. And one of the annoying things with working with 26 gauge wire is that because it's more malleable and more flexible, that top wire is more prone to bending while you're wrapping. So usually you just have to kind of stop and fix it before moving on. All right, so there, I'm almost done with row 5 here. I'll rotate my leaf. Whenever things get kind of wonkified while I'm beading, if I just grab the bottom and the top and kind of wiggle it back and forth while pulling in opposite directions, that usually helps to straighten things out. So you can fix it if things get a little bit pulled out of place. It just takes some patience and some careful molding and wiggling to get it straightened back out. All right, we're going to wrap row 5 at the bottom wire. Again, 45-degree angle wrap. And now we're making row 6, which is going to be the last row on this side of the leaf. We're going to bring beads up, carefully mold, make sure you're holding tension on your beads so you don't get gaps between your beads in the middle of your row. Make sure those rows of beads are really tight and close together. Pinch and hold them in place, and then we're going to bring that lacing wire around the back side of row 6. Use my thumbnail to mark where I want the lacing wire to go. Just acts as a little guide so that it's more likely to go where I want it instead of between the wrong beads. Loop around just row 6 and pull tight. Now because I'm working with 28 gauge wire, I'm not going to double wrap. If you're working with 30 gauge wire, you probably should double wrap. Now I've got a situation here. My lacing wire did not go perfectly straight, so I'm going to undo it. You could leave it if you want. I'm going to undo it because I don't like it. So I'm just going to quickly undo that and try and redo my lacing so I get it a little bit nicer, a little bit more even. This is unnecessary, but I'm doing it anyways. I cannot wait until I do not need these gloves anymore. They are a pain. Okay. All right, row 6 up to the top wire. .45-degree angle wrap. Fold down the side. Straighten everything out, mold the row nicely. And this is the last row of beads that we're making for this leaf. Bring the lacing wire around the back. Loop around just row 7. Make sure the wire goes down between 2 beads in the row. Pull through to the back. Straighten everything back out. And then finish row 7. All right, 45-degree angle right there on our last row of beads, and we're going to double wrap the working wire right below the last row of beads. Now leaf D has 3 bottom wires, and that means we're not going to be removing the working wire, we're going to twist it into the bottom. But if I try and twist this wire in with wire that's already twisted, it's going to get a little bit lumpy, especially since this is actually twisting the opposite direction of the way that I need to twist in order to secure this last, the working wire. So I'm going to untwist this. I'm going to try and straighten these wires out a little bit if I can. And I'm going to pull those down straight. And then I'm going to bring the working wire down right between them. And I want to make sure that all 3 wires are nice and straight and parallel right together. Now the goal here is to try and get a nice smooth twist. So I'm going to show you how I do that. We're going to grab right here at the bottom of the leaf. That's just going to prevent any twists right here from coming untwisted, because we're actually twisting the opposite direction as the twists in the earlier parts of the bottom wire. We need to twist the same direction that we were wrapping our working wire at the end. So we need to wrap this direction. We're going to grab these wires a little bit down below the leaf. Make sure that they are straight and all matching and right beside each other. And we're going to twist while pulling in opposite directions. I'm pulling the leaf up and then my right hand down. And we're going to just twist that length of wire between my hands. Putting even pressure on all of the wires. Just like that. And we only need to twist down maybe an inch or so below those leaves. And we're still attached to the spool at this point. So what I'm going to do is cut off my working wire right down here. And then we need to cut open this bottom loop, which I'm going to do again off to the side, just like I did with leaf B. And I'm going to trim those all to different lengths. That way the wires won't end all at the same spot while I'm assembling my flower. All right, now I did not double wrap my lacing wire just because I used a 28 gauge wire. If you use 30, make sure you've double wrapped it before clipping it off. And I'm going to cut my lacing wire off by laying my wire cutters flat against the back side of my leaf. Right there, so I can snip really closely against the back side of my leaf and end up with either a very teeny tiny little tail or a very short one. If there is a tiny little tag of wire sticking up, you need to kind of tuck that down, and then you should be able to run your finger along the side without that lacing wire poking you. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Again, wire cutters flat against the back to get a nice close cut. And then we're going to finish off the top wire just like we did with the previous leaf. We're going to cut it about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch there, right at the top, and then fold it to the back side of the leaf. Now let's look at the back here. I want you guys to see the difference between the back and the front of your leaf. If you flip it over and look at the back, you should see all those little lacing wires where they came across the back side of the rose. So you're going to see kind of a line of stitching across the back. And then you're also going to see all the twists and wraps along the bottom wire and the top wire. That's how you know this is the back side. If you have this stitching on the front side of your leaf, then you brought your lacing wire over the front of the row before looping around, and you should have gone around the back. Now the front of the leaf, my lacing wire is going to show a little bit just because I used red and it's going to stand out, but you'll notice that the stitching doesn't come across the front. So all those little loops are down between beads, and it does not have a stitch across the front. And then all of my top wires and bottom wire wraps and twists are completely covered. So this is what the front of your leaf should look like. Now this is leaf D. You need to make 3 of these for 1 stem of Canterbury Bells. And now let's look at leaf C. This one is made just like leaf D, it's just a little bit shorter. You need about 10 inches of the darker green beads strung onto your spool of 26 gauge wire for each leaf C. This is going to be a 5-row basic frame, so 2 rows smaller than leaf D. And you need 1.5 inches of beads for the basic row. So the basic row is a little bit shorter. You will still be wrapping pointed bottom and pointed top, and you will still lace across the center. But leaf C only needs 2 bottom wires, so you'll reduce to 2 bottom wires like we did with leaf B, instead of using 3 like we did for leaf D. So leaf C, you need to make, let's see, where's my notes? 3 of these for 1 stem of Canterbury Bells. So you should have 8 leaf B, 3 leaf C, and 3 leaf D.